Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rolling. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In four, three, two, one. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters.
It's March 4th, 12 noon straight up. Welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. We're sponsored by mancavepodcasting.com. About 700 podcasts in the tank, completely free, no obligation, 24/7. If you want to do your own podcast, we'll produce, direct, manage, stream it live, get it into the cloud forever. The content is completely yours. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Appel. I'm joined by the socialist, a voice of reason and the madman across the water in Munich, Germany, Mr. John Scalia. Well, quite often I ask myself, when is enough enough? And the California state legislature just crossed over the line. Yesterday, Governor Gavin Newsom, well, actually a couple of days ago, he started easing the mask restrictions and declaring that the pandemic is moving into a less critical phase. Yet an aggressive slate of COVID-19 related bills to mandate vaccines for children and workers remains in play. This group of Democratic legislators, in my opinion, have not only gone too far, they've severely crossed over the line. They claim their intent is to increase vaccination rates. We've got 75-80% of the population vaccinated, which arguably is enough for herd immunity. However, taken together, the adoption of these bills, and again, they're just proposed, would clearly make California an outlier among all the other states and would give it the country's strictest COVID-19 regulations. Other states are thinking about it. Other states are discussing it. But these bills that have been proposed all attempt, or their intent is to allegedly bring a cohesion and a consistency and a clarity to California's overall approach and response to the pandemic, said Democratic Senator Josh Newman of Fullerton, a member of the group. And by the way, if I didn't say it a moment or two ago, if you got them, smoke them. I'm going to briefly go over these bills, and then I'm going to go into depth on one. Here are your bills. Senate Bill 871 would require all children 0 to 17 years old to get COVID-19 vaccines to attend childcare or school. Senate Bill 866, and of course, those of us in workers' comp are familiar with the existing 866. This would amend 866 to allow kids 12 to 17 to get the COVID-19 vaccine without parental consent. Senate Bill 1479 would require schools to continue testing and to create testing plans. Senate Bill 1018 would require online platforms to be more transparent about how information is pushed out to consumers. Senate Bill 1464 would force law enforcement officials to enforce public health orders. I think they do that already in a way. Assembly Bill 1797 would make changes to the California Immunization Record Database, Assembly Bill 2098 would reclassify the sharing of COVID-19 misinformation by doctors and surgeons as unprofessional conduct that would result in disciplinary action. And then the very last one, of course, is the one that I want to get on my high horse about. We've been doing Work Comp Matters for almost 5 years now. We started out workers' compensation, employment, and labor law. We've morphed into current events that affect you employees, employers, and as I always say, we have not forgotten about you damn independent contractors. Well, Assembly Bill 1993 is directly on point, hits the nail on the head, and it's put me on my soapbox. Assembly Bill 1993 would require all employees, including independent contractors, to show proof of COVID-19 vaccine to work in California. Let me repeat. Assembly Bill 1993 would require all employees, including independent contractors, to show proof of COVID-19 or they will not be allowed to work in California. Now I'm going to go over some of the specifics. Let's see here. This is introduced by Assembly members Wicks, Aguirre, Curry, Lowe, Akala, Weber. Principal co-authors, Senators Newman, Pan, and Weiner. Co-authors, Assembly members Quirk and Stone. Co-author, Senator Dodd. Introduced February 10th of this year. Quote, this bill would require an employer to require each person who is an employee or independent contractor and who is eligible to receive COVID-19 vaccine to show proof to the employer or an authorized agent thereof that the person has been vaccinated to go against COVID-19. This bill would establish an exception for religious beliefs, blah, 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 and would require compliance with various other state and federal laws. The bill would require proof of vaccination status to be obtained in a manner that complies with federal and state privacy laws, blah, blah, blah. This bill takes effect, if it passes, January 1, 2023. Each employer is required to affirm in a form and a manner provided by the department that each employee or independent contractor complied with the provisions and would require the employer to affirm that each new employee or independent contractor is in compliance at the time of hire or contracting with that person. This bill would require the department to impose a penalty of an unspecified amount on an employer for any violation of these provisions. And I presume this also means, hypothetically, when you're talking about employer and independent contractor, that if I hire a contractor to do work on my home, and this could even be a gardener or a maid, that if I do not verify their vaccination status, then me as the homeowner, I am in violation of state law because I had a gardener or a contractor or a maid who is unvaccinated. Again, that's my interpretation of what I'm reading. I have said constantly that I have no problem with employers or people that if they want to require me to be vaccinated to do business with them, then I either get vaccinated or I don't do business with them. But the way I interpret this is that the state of California is preventing anybody and everybody from earning a living, from doing business in California, unless they are vaccinated. Once again, Assembly Bill 1993. I think this is totally ridiculous. I think it's total government overreach. I think it's an abuse of power. I think it interferes with my constitutional amendment for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Look, we've had all along for a year now, since the vaccines have been out, there have been regulations and mandates that if you're not fully vaccinated and or you're not wearing a mask and or you haven't had a negative COVID test, that you cannot go into a public place. I get that. I'm fine. Of course, we saw at the Super Bowl, that mega event with 70,000 people, that hardly anybody there, including Mayor Garcetti, was not masked. But even though it was completely against the law, and now we have this. This steps over the line. It's government overreach, and I will do everything in my power and time to prevent this law or this proposal from going into effect. That's my rant. And John, what do you think?
Well, what did I tell you when you sent me the email outlining all those bills?
You told me it was way too long and boorish. I'm paraphrasing.
Boring.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and my feeling hasn't changed. Those are all proposals. If any of them occur, then I might join you in your rants. But in the meantime, they don't matter.
It's interesting. On one side of the coin, you have the Governor Gavin Newsom, who's allegedly, and he is, we're releasing restrictions and mandates where we're not requiring people to be masked or whatnot to go into public places. And now, right down the pike, right after that, comes this.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a disconnect between Newsom and a number of people in his party. I doubt very much if they coordinated their proposals with the governor's office.
I don't know what to tell you, John, but I just think it's completely ridiculous. Also, by the way, what about Assembly Bill 2098? Reclassify the sharing of COVID-19 misinformation by doctors and surgeons as unprofessional conduct, resulting in disciplinary measure. I have a question. Who the hell is going to be up at the state determining whether or not what information doctors and surgeons give is misinformation or disinformation? That's what I want to know.
Well, I would say that that law is dead in the water. I mean, even if they get enough numbskulls to vote for it, it's unconstitutional. I mean, the other stuff that you think is unconstitutional probably isn't, but that particular piece of legislation probably is.
Okay.
It's freedom of speech.
Yeah, I think so. And you know me, I'm a huge believer of proponent of freedom of speech. If it's my choice whether or not I...
Real proponent of freedom. On over-the-air television in Germany, you can use the F word. In America, you can't. In over-the-air television in Germany, you can show nudity. In America, you can't. I mean, you tell me which one's got more freedom of expression. But nonetheless, regardless of that little mini rant on my part, no, a bill like that says misinformation. I mean, now you're bordering on what they do in Russia and what they do in dictatorships, and where they say, if we can classify it as misinformation, you're in trouble with the authorities. America has historically rejected that as an approach to counteracting nonsense. I mean, even if it is misinformation, basically it's allowed.
And John, the drinking age mostly in the European Union is 18, not 21, right?
Oh no, it's less than that. In Germany, you can drink. I believe German kids can drink beer and wine over the age of 14, and they can drink hard alcohol over the age of 16.
Yes, and that being said, we have more alcoholics in the United States per capita probably than anywhere in the world, and of course that's because in the European Union, at least from what I've seen, parents teach their kids at an early age, teenage, even younger, to moderately drink. There would always be wine on the table, and even if the kids have a half a glass, they mix it with water, and the kids learn to moderately drink and argue.
I grew up in an Italian family. I don't know about your Jewish family, but in my Italian family, at big family dinners, all of us kids were allowed to have a little bit of the wine, a little, yeah. I mean, absolutely. It was no big deal.
Whereas in the United States, quite often parents will say alcohol bad, 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 and then as soon as they turn 21, they binge drink and puke their guts out. You know what I mean? So
a funny story. I mean, after my ski lesson, my ski instructor and I got along. It didn't hurt that she was pretty, so I invited her for a beer. Right, and she goes and sits down, and we have a beer. I knew she was young, and so we're sitting there having a beer, and I asked her. I said, "How old are you?" And she said, "I'm 19." I'm thinking, if I'd been in America, not only would we be breaking the law, I'd be contributing to the delinquency of a minor.
Exactly. You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're sponsored by mancavepodcasting.com. About 700 shows in the tank, completely free, no obligation. If you want to do your own podcast, 818-357-4120. We'll produce, manage, direct, stream it live, and get it into the cloud forever. And now we've got John Scalia with some comment by myself, Steve Appel, on the news of the day that we believe is of interest to you employees, employers, and independent contractors.
Here's an interesting story. I am not going to subject you to my American accented German, but this is a story from the classical music station, their website, about the Munich Philharmonic, and it involves employment law. Okay, the conductor of the Munich Philharmonic is a Russian guy. His name is Valery Gergiev, and Valery Gergiev is a good buddy of Vladimir Putin. Now, all of Europe is united against what's going on in Ukraine, pretty much. I mean, it's overwhelmingly united against the Russian aggression. Everybody is upset and ticked off, et cetera, et cetera. So, he's directing the Munich Philharmonic, right? So they ask him, they say, Valery, you've got to come out and oppose the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And he said, no, I won't. So the mayor of Munich, who happens to be a socialist, by the way, a guy I actually voted for, said, you know what, Valery, you're fired. So here's the situation. Now we've got a contract law problem, right? Because undoubtedly Valery's got a contract with the city of Munich, which pays the salaries for the Munich Philharmonic. And they've just told him, you're fired. And why? Not because you're not a good conductor, but because you won't come out and condemn the Russian war in Ukraine. So obviously, it hasn't happened yet, but obviously he's going to file a lawsuit against the city of Munich. And based on employment law, he's going to argue, well, this has nothing to do with my ability to conduct an orchestra. I mean, whatever my opinion is about what Russia does in its foreign policy has nothing to do with how the Munich Symphony sounds. So, in American law, we would say, well, it's not related to his job. Okay. However, I have an interesting approach. I mean, as you probably have gathered by now, I love thinking outside the box. And if I were representing the city of Munich, because I'm on their side, I'd like to get rid of this guy too. I would defend it not as a matter of employment law. I would say, look, the only reason we hired this guy is because he does have a reputation internationally. He's well known. He's well respected as a conductor, and we knew that would get people. That would get behinds in the seats in the Munich Philharmonic. Now, with his refusal to condemn what's going on in Ukraine, a lot of people will just boycott and they won't come. So basically, by doing this, he's made his employment impossible. Now, I'm not sure that any German lawyer is going to think of that as an approach. And if they don't, then I think they're going to be stuck with a straight contract lawsuit by Gergievs against the city of Munich, saying, you owe me the money and you've got to let me conduct or pay me. So it'll be interesting down the line. So there you go. I spared you from reading the article in German.
Thank you. And interesting on the words, because we have a conductor, and I wonder if in his contract there is a good conduct clause for the conductor. And if there isn't, go ahead.
I kind of doubt it in Europe. I mean, to be honest with you, because what Americans might consider bad conduct in Europe, people would just say, "Who cares?" So I doubt if there's a morals clause. I mean, there might be. We don't know what his contract says. But in all honesty, I'm not sure that, it would be, I think you can try to get the morals clause invoked by saying, not opposing the aggression is immoral or, amoral at best, perhaps. But I still think my argument, we hired this guy because he's going to put butts in the seats. And with this attitude, we know that the people in Munich are going to say, we're not going to go to your concert hall. We want our money back. So basically, he's made his employability impossible. To me, that's a better argument. Although I agree, what you said occurred to me immediately. Is there a morals clause? Then I thought, well, first of all, probably not. And secondly, it might be a harder argument to make.
And also in situations like this, at least in America, when you have a contract, especially with someone of this stature, it's not going to be at will. Most employee relationships are at will as long as you don't violate civil rights. When you've got a contract here and I haven't seen it, I'm sure it's not at will.
I'm sure it's not. And I once again want to point out to all our listeners and viewers or whoever, wherever you are, the guy who fired him is the socialist mayor of Munich, the guy I voted for. So once again, I know Americans have a real hard problem thinking that socialists and communists are different, but this is a perfect example of the huge difference between socialists and communists.
Absolutely. Okay, John, what's the next news story, please?
Well, the next one is rather actually goes along with what you were saying about California unveils a care unit for people who are mentally ill. You're always talking about the homeless and the people who are mentally ill. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Let me pull it up. It's called California Unveils Care Courts. Say that 10 times fast.
I saw something about this. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. If they're going to let me, well.
Yeah. And while you're looking it up, John, what I saw was some type of an establishment of an administrative court to deal with the homeless. And of course, as all of our work comp listeners know, workers' compensation, unemployment, disability, labor, those are all administrative forms of law. And what I saw is the proposal to establish an administrative homeless court. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the misery experienced on San Francisco sidewalks has long offered a case study in the failure of California's mental health care system. Now, you said the same thing about LA, right? Now, the dire situation is inspiring a proposal for a sweeping overhaul. Governor Gavin Newsom's plan, to be unveiled Thursday, seeks to tackle two big flaws in the system: the shortage of desperately needed care and the strict limitations on compelling treatment for people who are too sick to understand they need help. His proposal, called Care Court, would create a mental health-focused arm of the civil courts in every county. For the first time, the state would require counties to provide comprehensive treatment to those suffering from debilitating psychosis and risk sanctions if they don't. The people in the program, in turn, would be obligated to accept the care. In an exclusive interview Wednesday, Newsom grew visibly angry as he discussed his hometown, That's San Francisco, folks. The city he presided over as mayor more than a decade ago, which prides itself on its so-called compassion as it lets people wither and die on its streets. So I think you probably agree with this proposal from Governor Newsom, and clearly the state, especially what's been happening with its finances during the COVID thing, the state has the money to do this. So I think it's a good step. It's a first step. I think the second step that goes along with that is making sure that these people have housing too, which is something you're always talking about.
Yes, and of course, existing law, at least in Los Angeles County, says that we're not legally allowed to kick anybody off the sidewalk or off a public place unless we can offer them a bed and a roof. And I'm in favor of anything that legally gets the homeless off the street. I understand the need and the want to go back into someone's history, to find out the reasons why they ended up on the street, to deal with those issues, to provide both physical and mental health. But the first key is to get them off the streets. And it's been proven time and time again that a minimum 85%, even more of the homeless that are on the street want to stay on the street because they feel if they go into a halfway house, into some type of hospital, into a care facility, that it is restricting their rights to live off the grid. And as far as
I don't know if the percentage is actually that high, but you notice when I read the article, it points out that they're going to be obligated to accept the care, so they're not going to have the option of saying I want to live on the street.
The majority of the homeless that are on the street and do not want to leave the street when they've been offered a bed and or a roof or a facility are either mentally ill and or drug addicted. Those homeless that have been temporarily kicked out for financial reasons or violence in the home or whatever have most of them have a genuine desire and will do anything within the bounds of the law to get off the street.
Yeah, and so I think it's a good first step. I mean, obviously nothing's perfect, but this is better than what we got right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, John, I think we've got time for you to have one last story.
Okay, this is actually from Yahoo Finance. President Joe Biden said in a State of the Union address on Tuesday, he's tapping a new boss to fight pandemic-related financial crimes. The move comes as the U.S. Justice Department prosecutes cases around the country alleging people falsified paperwork to obtain forgivable loans meant for small businesses. As of March 2021, the Justice Department had publicly charged 474 defendants with pandemic-related criminal fraud, alleging more than $569 million in illegally obtained funds. So I think that's that's smart. I mean, when you initiate a program as big as what America did to try to alleviate the pain, ameliorate the pain of the pandemic, that was a good move. But there's always unscrupulous people who are going to take advantage of it. And good, this is a time to go after those people and say, you weren't you weren't a person in need. You're just a fraudster. So I think it's great.
Closing thoughts, burning desires.
Well, we all have to send our hopes, prayers, and whatever's to the people in Ukraine who are being blown up. Their whole cities and their families are being separated. I mean, this is the worst thing since Adolf Hitler that's happened to Europe, and it's clear that Russia does not deserve to belong as a member of civilized society.
All right, very good, and that'll about do it. Much thanks to Scott Walton of legendary Uncle Studio, John Scalia in Munich, Germany, all the good people back at mancavepodcasting.com. My name's Steve Appel. We'll see you again Monday, 12 noon live for another edition of Work Comp Matters.